All right, what's up, guys? I hope you are having a wonderful day. Today's video, I wanted to talk to you guys about the main reason I am excited about Ashes of Creation, and this is going to be a long video. I'm going to provide a brief outline for you guys so you guys know where I'm coming from here, but overall, I am very excited about Ashes of Creation's PvX environment. And I think that the PvX environment is very exciting because, frankly, I have a PvX experience from one of my favorite games of all time, and it's one of my favorite areas too that I've ever participated in. So in this video, I'm going to talk about my PvX environment that I participated in, that I really enjoyed, that has just kind of started to fall to the wayside. And then I want to transition and then talk about what Ashes of Creation is doing and why, frankly, on paper, what Ashes of Creation is attempting to do is my favorite area on steroids. And so that's what this video is. We're going to talk a lot about a game you guys might not know, and then we're going to draw comparisons, and I'm going to explain to you guys why I am so excited about getting into Alpha 2. So let's dive into it. First of all, we need to define what PvX is. By definition, it is between player versus player and player versus environment. If you have a sliding scale where player versus player is the only thing you experience and player versus environment on the other end is the only thing you experience, PvX is somewhere in the middle. It's player versus environment where you can encounter PvP and you can encounter PvE often at the same time. And these types of environments, in my opinion, have a lot of replayability. They have a lot of replayability due to the variations of different things that you encounter at any point in time. And I wanted to go into that into this video. Now, my favorite PvX environment that I have ever experienced was the Elder Scrolls Online's Imperial City. Imperial City released for the Elder Scrolls Online back in August of 2015, 9 years ago. At this point in time, I had been playing ESO for a few months with the console release back in June of 2015. Yes, guys, I was a console pleb. Please don't judge me too harshly on this. I didn't know any better. The Imperial City DLC, in my opinion, still stands as ESO's best DLC release for a variety of reasons. First was the PvX environment. Outside of the load-in safe zones for each district and the home bases, you could get attacked by other factions or enemies in each district in the sewers of Imperial City. I could bore you guys for a much longer time than even I'm going to here, going into the details of Imperial City, but instead, I just want to highlight the overall outline of Imperial City and then comparing it to what Ashes of Creation is doing. Imperial City can be broken up into two districts. You have your upper district level, where you have different sections of districts sectioned off with different NPCs, different loot drops, different bosses, these different things. And you also have the Imperial City sewers that also have separate loot tables and separate bosses. Now, let's talk difficulty. These bosses and NPCs back in 2015 were very difficult. I remember going into the sewers for the first time and watching 24-man groups wiping over and over again to these upper level district bosses, as well as Molag Bal below. At the time, even some of the district NPCs were tough to kill. Those of us, at this point in time, I was trying to farm a specific jewelry set, and the Winged Twilights were just absolutely destroying me. It was very tough for me to go around and kill them individually for a bit. That's how difficult the area was. It was a lot easier for me to run with two people, and it was a challenging environment. The fact that a lone NPC could provide a challenge for one player meant that, a lot of players were incentivized to group up and run around and experience this new area. The world environment also was great for PvP. You have to have both. You have to have an NPC, a challenging NPC environment. You also have to have an exciting PvP environment. Now, because of these different loot drops, because of these different areas and different bosses and different NPCs, they had varying levels as well. And because it's an MMORPG and we have different types of players with different types of builds, this means that different fights would happen in different areas of these districts. If you were a specific type of player, a more kitey player, you may not want to hide in a corner. You may want to be in open space, kiting around and fighting large groups of players that way. If you're more of a tanky player, you may want to pull people into a corner and fight in an alley or a corridor or something like that. And so because of this, because of these different types of zones, because these different areas where players couldn't experience, and there being different types of NPCs, meant that there was a lot of replayability that just naturally existed due to the environment that existed. And so unlike playing in Battlegrounds, where you're playing on the exact same map and you're doing team deathmatch, or you're doing capture the flag, or you're doing one of these other game modes where it's the same repeatable thing, it can be fun for a while. It can be fun for months. It can be fun for a year. It doesn't have the same replayability of a PvX environment where things are changing, where all of a sudden you can have NPCs pulled on top of you. You have different amounts of players. This isn't a 4v4 zone like a Battleground is. This could be 1 versus 12. This could be 1 versus 20. This could be 10 versus 20. This could be 10 versus 5. There are different amounts of players that can be involved in any type of fight in this zone. And that's what made it exciting. You never knew what you're going to experience. Now, all this is great, right? You have a challenging world area. You have a challenging PvP area. But what was the driver? How do you get people down there? Like, it's not just Field of Dreams. If we build it, they will come. Like, okay, you built the area. It's cool. It has all these cool areas. But what's the incentivization? What are the reasons that people would come down into Imperial City back in 2015? Well, first of all, it was the reward structure. They had a lot of very valuable items. If you go back and look at that point in time, they had 3 different jewelry sets that existed for Magicka, Stamina, and tank-based specs. And their jewelry items were best in slot across the board. So if you wanted to farm for your favorite Stamina melee-based class, you would want the Agility jewelry. If you wanted to have the most powerful Sork at the time, you would run Willpower jewelry. And if you wanted to have a tank and be one of the best tanks, you would often run the Endurance jewelry. And so this gear applied not only to PvP, but it also often was best in PvE. So Trials players, so dungeon players that wanted to have higher amounts of DPS, wanted to be better tanks, they also wanted this jewelry. And so this meant that there was a demand for this jewelry for the entire population. And so a lot of players went down there and in order to farm it. And so even if you didn't like, doing PvP and you didn't want to do that and you want to do your PvE stuff, you would still have to buy this jewelry. And as long as you didn't equip it, it wasn't bound. Other people could go down and farm it and they could sell it to you. And so it created this in-game economy to where players that wanted to participate in this environment would go down in the environment and farm this stuff in order to sell this best in slot jewelry. Now, that was only just part of it. They also introduced a new currency called Telvar Stones. Now, Telvar Stones, let's just explain what it is. If you kill an NPC in an area, you get X amount of Telvar Stones. If you killed a player at that point in time, another enemy player, PvP guy, you would take 80% of the Telvar Stones. And so these Telvar Stones were also valuable. You could use it to purchase powerful item sets. At that point in time, there were 2 or 3 item gear sets for PvP that were very, very good. Reactive, Black Rose, Shield Breaker, these sets at that point in time were pretty valuable. Now, not even if you didn't run them, you could also sell and trade these as well. And so a lot of players, a lot of tanks, a lot of tanky healers would want to run Reactive. A lot of DPS players would want to run Black Rose. And so if you could get your hands on Telvar Stones, if you were good at doing it, you could sell this gear and make a ton of money. And so a lot of players would go down there for that reason. And so now you have 2 different reasons already. You have best in slot gear for everybody. Now you have some PvP gear. But on top of this, in the Imperial City release, they also increased the level cap. So there was higher level materials. There was also higher level gear that you could make. And the Telvar Stones could be used to purchase these materials. The materials for crafting the higher level gear, the materials for crafting the higher level glyphs. And so all these players that wanted to get into PvE and they wanted to have the highest damage dealing DPS builds, they needed to have new crafted gear, or they need to equip the strongest glyphs onto these things. And so there was an economy for everybody that was re-gearing at this point as well. And so now you have this demand for all this different type of gear. And then even if you didn't like any of that gear, there's also a demand for all these other glyphs that existed in the game. And so you had all these things that existed at that point in time, which drove out incentivization for players to want to go participate in this world. Now, on top of that, they also allowed you to collect these things they were called stone keys. And I don't have to go into it too much, but it was another thing that you could collect. And in 2 very specific dungeons that also had very good armor sets, you could collect these keys and you could open chests for an RNG chance at some of these sets as well. So if you weren't good at running the dungeon, but you were good at, going and grinding for hours down in the sewers by yourself and collecting these keys, you could then go and exchange these keys for powerful armor sets up there as well. And so there was all sorts of demand in this area, is my point. And so because they had all this demand in this area for different players to want to participate, it wasn't just PvPers coming down. It wasn't just PvEers coming down. It wasn't just one specific group of players. It was the vast majority of players at that point in time going, hey, this area is really cool. although I may not be the best PvPer in the world, I want to go experience Imperial City. I want to get these powerful things. I want to have this risk versus reward situation to where I'm holding onto these Televar stones, and I know that if I lose them, I lose 80%. And so there's just a different level of incentivization back then. And so on top of the incentivization for Televar stones, they also had a multiplier. And so Televar stones had a multiplier based off how many you were holding. If you're holding 0, you would get X amount of Televar stones. If you were holding a 100 Televar, you'd get a 2X multiplier, so you'd get twice the amount. 1,000, you get 3 times the amount. And if you're holding 10,000 Televar stones, you would get a 4X multiplier. And so players would often make decisions off of their own skill level. Like, hey, I'm pretty good at this PvP stuff, or my group is really good. We're going to go down there and we're going to take the max level multiplier and we're going to crush everything because that's just what we do all day, every day. Or if you weren't as good and you were running solo and you were dying a lot, you're like, you know what? Maybe when I get to like 1,000 or 2,000, I'm going to go deposit because it's just not worth it for me. And so not only did you have a challenging environment, you had this risk versus reward for collecting Televar stones as well and trying to figure out what you were safe with holding on to, what you were safe with depositing, these sorts of things. And so there was a variety of different things to experience at that point in time. Now, the overarching point of Imperial City is it wasn't just any one of these things. It was all of these things. It was the challenging area. It was the incentivization, the reward for participating. So when I would go down there, I am naturally a more PvP based player. I enjoy PvP. But if there was nobody to PvP with, because there's nobody down in the sewers, I would just go and I would farm bosses. I would farm gear. I would do these sorts of things. And I would expand my character that way. I would just collect the material to sell these goods to other players. And so there was an incentivization to where, oh yeah, I do want to PvP, but if I don't have to PvP, or if there's nobody to PvP with, the world is still challenging. The area is still challenging. The area is still fun. And I'm still incentivized to participate in the area, even though there's nobody else there. Imagine saying that about a battlegrounds area where you're queuing in and you have to wait 50 minutes because there's nobody else to fight. Now you're just stuck doing something else. The something else in Imperial City was still advancing your character. And that was the best part about it, is no matter what you were doing, you were expanding, you were expanding your account and you were improving things. Now, I spent a good 4 to 5 years almost solely in Imperial City sewers. It was really good. And I would contend, as I said earlier, that Imperial City is I personally think it is the best DLC that the Elder Scrolls Online has ever come out with. And I think if you look at improvements over the years, if you compare Imperial City Sewers that came out in 2015 to some of the other DLCs that came out around the same time, they have made more improvements and addendums and changes to Imperial City Sewers than they have anything else. If you go and look at Somerset, if you go and look at Craglorn, if you go and look at all these other older Thieves Guild, if you look at all these other PvE-based DLCs, they're not making changes to those DLCs in the same way that they're making changes to Imperial City Sewers. Now, I had to edit this because I said I was going to go in a long spiel about how, after 9 years, things have fallen to the wayside for Imperial City and it's not as popular as it used to be, which is still true. It's still true. There were, what used to take 12 to 24 people to kill a boss, I can now solo. Due to gear progression in the game, the world environment in Imperial City Sewers isn't what it used to be. I can solo every boss in there. I can do everything by myself, and that used to not be the case. And so a lot of the difficulty has changed. But ZeniMax and Elder Scrolls, they have constantly added new things to keep the value of Televar stones. So 5 years ago or so, they introduced alchemy satchels to where so you could use Televar stones to purchase flowers in order to make potions. And so what they have done is they've constantly been expanding stuff in Imperial City Sewers to keep a demand for people wanting to go down there and wanting to enjoy the DLC in a way that no other DLC is really being done. So even a theme park style MMO like Elder Scrolls Online, where their development team admittedly says, we're not going to go work on old content. We want to make new content. We want to make new experiences and new stories because that's how theme parks make money. They are still going back to make changes on this 9-year-old DLC. Even yesterday, and this is why I had to edit this and redo this video, even yesterday, their new patch notes have shown that they are changing Imperial City Sewers once again. They're incorporating new things. They're doing more things to get people down there. Now, I have spent a long time talking to you guys about Imperial City Sewers. I know. I know. It was my favorite zone for a very long time. But how does this apply to Ashes of Creation? Why have you watched this video for 15 minutes talking about this great area, this great PvX area? Well, frankly, Ashes of Creation wants to essentially be Imperial City on steroids. It is a much larger area. It is a much larger zone. And instead of Ashes of Creation being one DLC of PvX, it is an entire world of PvX. Now, there will be some, isolated PvE things. There will be some isolated battlegrounds things, but the vast majority, it's not a theme park style MMO where they're going to constantly come out with new DLCs where you're sectioning off and this is going to be a PvE only area or this is going to be a PvP only area. Everything in Ashes of Creation is interwoven into their PvX environment. And so we're going to talk about the same thing here. Well, like I said, world size, way larger. It's just way larger than Imperial City. There's no discussion on this. Now, if we want to talk about challenge, we want to talk about how challenging Ashes of Creation is from a PvE scenario. We can look no further than the last Dragon showcase that they did, where they showcased a 40-man raid versus a public dragon. And I would contend that if Steven didn't have the invincibility on his account, that 40-man raid would have probably wiped. They probably would have wiped to this one dragon. And so when you look at the difficulty, when you look at different caravans where they're showcasing caravans and they're killing NPCs on the side and their health bars are dropping, when they're fighting different areas, you can tell that a lot of these NPCs are challenging to experience. You can tell that a lot of these bosses, even for 40 people, are challenging to experience. And this is interwoven into the world. Now, with that on top, it's not just about the PvE environment, it's also about PvX. Well, what PvX, what PvP also exists in Ashes of Creation? Well, first of all, you have your caravan-based PvP. And caravan-based PvP is, okay, let's say we have to go harvest. We're MMORPG players, we're all experts at chopping down trees, right? Let's say I go down and I chop down 100 ash trees. Well, I can deliver those 100 ash trees to my node, and I can get a 1-to-1 gold exchange. And so 100 ash trees equals 100 gold. Great, right? Awesome. Safe, perfectly fine to do. However, what they showed is if you travel 20 to 30 minutes by caravan to a neighboring node, you could potentially get a 3x, a 4x, or a 5x multiplier on whatever you're dropping off. And so that incentivization to participate in a PvP area and to go a little bit further and to participate in caravans rewards you more for chopping down the trees. And so if you don't want to chop down the trees, you don't have to. But if you're good at running caravans, and they have said this as well, the farther you participate in caravans, the farther you carry your goods across the world of Vera, the higher the multiplier is going to be. And so this is a reward structure on PvP. It's not slapped together like other theme park style MMOs. If I'm good at PvP, just like I'm good at PvP in Imperial City Sewers, I'm rewarded based off of multipliers. And so if I'm good at participating in this, I'm going to get rewarded more. Much like the Telvar structure that I explained before, where you get a 4x multiplier for the more that you carry. And so if you're better at participating in these systems, it is more rewarding to do so. Now, that just applies to PvPers, obviously. Like players that really want to participate in caravans and they want to go do caravan runs, that's one aspect, right? That's not the only aspect of PvP that exists. There are also node wars and node sieges, and there are also guild wars as well. But I wanted to talk about node wars and node sieges in this video. We're already quite a ways into this video, but let's talk about what node wars are. And before we talk about node wars, let's talk about what nodes are. Nodes are their city system, and their city system is driven by scarcity. And so what this means is there are only so many max level nodes that will exist in the world of Vera. Not every single node will advance to the max level. And these max level nodes is where the max level refining will happen. And so if you need the highest level refining, you will want to go to these max level nodes in order to expand your trade, in order to level up these things in order for this to happen. And now also naturally, because more people are congregated in one of these larger nodes, the economy there is better. The world of Vera will not have a server-wide economy. It will have a regional-based economy. And so a lot of these higher level nodes, they will have better trade. I'm not saying they're going to have the best prices because we won't know that, of course. They will have the widest variety of goods. I'm sure you guys have all been into regional-based traders where if you went into the highest populated area, you were more likely to find what you were looking for. It wouldn't be the best deal, but you'd be able to find it more quickly. And so when you look at this, it incentivizes a lot of different types of players to want to level up their node. They want to be part of the max level node. They want to be part of the largest node in the area. And in order to do so, in order to maintain your ground, you may want to siege other nodes. You may want to participate in node wars. And so what node wars do is if you see another node nearby and they're larger than you and they're clearly expanding further than you faster, you may want to attack them, because if you win the node war, one of the examples that they provided for the winners of the node war is you could potentially siphon off experience off of their node. And so now all these players that are working to advance their node, if you win that node war for a period of time, you get to siphon off that experience. They're now essentially working for you. It's a lot more complicated than that, but that is an exciting reward structure where if you're wanting to advance your character and you're wanting to advance your node for your own selfish reasons, everybody in your node wants to do the same thing. You all have a common goal to want to do the exact same thing, and you are all going to mostly be aligned in wanting to take the other node out because it advances yourself. And so this creates a situation to where players that may not want to be, they're not heavy PvPers, but they are now incentivized to want to participate in these types of node wars and node sieges. Now, there's also node sieges, like I just said, where if there is a bigger or smaller node and they're annoying you or you want to take them down a peg, you can conduct a node siege, and if you win, you reduce their entire node to rubble, and you can then loot the ashes. And so this is also exciting because, sure, some nodes may start off faster. They may get up to a higher level. But if they don't maintain their group, if they're not well led, if they don't have a good group of players wanting to fight and work together, they can be taken down by a much better group. And so this incentivizes players to want to attack and to defend. And so this incentivization for PvP is very exciting because there's different types of PvP and it's varying levels of rewards. Sometimes you're rewarded monetarily, sometimes you're rewarded by advancing your node and helping everybody in your node progress. And that is something that a lot of PvE based MMORPGs ignore. And so when I look at Ashes of Creation as a whole, I know I spent a lot of time talking about the PvP environment, but if you go and you watch the last year's live streams of them engaging and encountering the world, the NPCs, the world story, all these big bosses are also very challenging. When you look at the reward structure for winning and losing these node wars and node sieges, this is also very rewarding and very punishing. And so this type of environment is essentially Imperial City Sewers for me on steroids. It is just a better version. It is a better economy. It is going to be better maintained because it's not just a DLC. Unlike Imperial City Sewers, which I still contend is fantastic, which I still think is one of the best DLCs I've ever played, it was just a DLC, and the developers moved on to other DLCs. They moved on to other stories. This is Ashes of Creation's PvX is interwoven into the game. And so you would think that because of that, there will be more attention to detail on the economy. There will be more attention to detail on the NPCs, on the world environment, making things challenging for players and maintaining that difficulty in a way that other MMOs just frankly cannot, because they're introducing new and exciting products. When Ashes of Creation introduces a new DLC or a new add-on, it'll be interwoven into what's already been built. And so that's the exciting part to me. That's the exciting part that, this is the main structure. It's not just, new downloadable content. It is the entire thing. And so that's been my experience. My PvX experience has been one of my favorite MMORPG experiences ever. Not just going down there and participating in PvP, but also just experiencing the world and knowing that around the corner at any point in time, PvP can happen. That sort of challenge, that sort of risk that can happen, potentially losing everything, makes things so much more exciting from a gaming perspective, in my opinion. And so that's why I have rambled on to you guys for the last 25 minutes. That's why I've rambled on to you guys for so long. I am very, very excited about a PvX system where it's all about PvX all the time. And so wanted to explain that in this video. Wanted to kind of talk to you guys about my experience. This is just my opinion. Now, frankly, the scope of this game is large. This isn't the only reason, this game has brought people in and has gotten people excited about it, but this is just mine. And so I wanted to explain to you mine. I obviously want to hear yours. What has gotten you into Ashes of Creation? What is the main thing that has drawn you in? I want to hear it in the comment section below. Thank you for watching, guys. Have a nice day.